Okay, so I wanted to maybe help someone with these engagements and running through my understanding of this. One thing I do want to say is this table was created by another Redditor. I don't know who, and I tried to find it and I couldn't find the post, but thank you very much. Feel free to credit them if you know who they are. One thing I did do is rearrange these, the order of the items, and I did also add compliance here. Other than that, I want to run through how I remembered all of these because I think it was very, very helpful, and I know a lot of people are talking about how this is a very important subject. So, that being said, let's roll. I did draw out this entire table. It only took me like 5 minutes at the start of the exam because I had done it like 7 times before, and that was enough for me to remember how to write it out, and it also helped a lot in remembering these different aspects for each engagement. So you don't need to write it out when on your scratch paper during the exam by any means. I do think it is very helpful writing it out just in general and for preparation purposes. One thing that also helps if you do that is to switch up the order, because otherwise you might just remember how the table is laid out. If you're not going to draw the table, don't. So yeah. Okay. How do I remember all the engagement types? I think this is very, very helpful in mapping out in your head or on paper the different aspects for each engagements when you do list them all out. So if you're not going to write out this whole table, I still think it's helpful to write out all the engagement types. I did come up with a mnemonic that you might find helpful for writing these out. So, and I'll tell you why I put them in this order in a second. So, I have AIR, CPS, like Child Protection Services, and then ERA. I like to think of like the Eras Tour. I don't know, if you're a Taylor Swift fan, that might resonate with you. And then PPMC, I know these are I call them subgroups. You can call them whatever you want, just different types of engagements that you can perform, or different types of procedures performed under multiple engagements, attestation engagements. Okay, so AIR, CPS, ERA, and then PPMC is what I write out. I think pancakes plus maple equals comfort. I know it sounds dumb, but it helped me remember. And then one other thing is ACEP is all in alphabetical order. Okay. So that helped too. Moving on now. The engagement types. Let me actually start a timer in just a second. Okay. The engagement types. So the first two I have listed here are the engagements that these are organized kind of by standards and then by level of assurance from high to least level of assurance per standard, with the exception of these at the bottom. So, audit of financial statements and interim review of the 10Q. I list those out first because the standards that are applied for these are your typical SAS and PCAOB for issuer. And then here's also non-issuers SAS and issuers PCAOB. Okay. Level of assurance, an audit of financial statements is reasonable assurance because you provide an opinion. You should know this by now. This is your main audit, I like to think. This is like whenever someone audits a public company, you're required to do this, as you see here. And then the next three are for non-issuers only, okay? So feel free to fill in yes for non-issuers all the way down because they can perform all of these. And then for issuers, the only 3 no's are this group of 3, because you can only perform this for non-issuers. Because of that, they're governed under SSARS, which is a non-issuer related standard. and there is a review of financial statements, a compilation, and a preparation. So how do you remember how to fill these out to the right, you might ask? I like to, like I said, I like to put it from least assurance to most assurance. And we'll go over assurance actually in a little bit. I'd like to finish this section first. The engagement types. So SOC 1/2, that's kind of an engagement on its own. You do provide an opinion. The only reason why it's an attestation is because there's no financial statements to audit, okay? So then there's an examination, review, and agreed upon procedures. These are all SSAE, okay? And then, like I said earlier, I like to call these the subgroups, the pro forma, prospective financial statements, MD&A, and compliance. Also, guys, if I make a mistake, please correct me. I have done a lot of research on this, so this is all per my best understanding, and yeah. Okay, so that is how I organize engagement type. And then I also filled out, whether in your head or on paper, the standards that are applied depending on these engagements. It's pretty easy when you have the top two as non-issuer or PCAOB and SAS, and then the group of 3 for SARS, which is non-issuer only, because then you also fill out the no's. And then the next column is independence required. Actually, we're going to go over level of assurance first because this one correlates. This one is kind of the foundation of the next columns. So, like I said, I filled this out from high to least assurance per kind of subgroup that I have going on here. Reasonable assurance means that you provide an opinion, okay? This is the highest level of assurance that you can give. As you can see here, you are performing your typical audit procedures. So this is detailed testing, risk assessments, testing the controls, and substantive procedures. And then there's limited assurance. This is also known as negative assurance. Do not confuse negative assurance for no assurance, okay? Negative assurance means that you're not providing an opinion, but you're saying that nothing came to our attention. And then there's no assurance. So how to remember what level of assurance goes to what? This one I find very easy to remember, the audit of financial statements, as well as a SOC 1/2 report and examination attestation. These are the only 3 that you can provide an opinion on, so those are the only 3 reasonable level of assurances. Okay, and then any review is limited assurance. So review, limited assurance, and then review attestation is limited assurance. So there's 3 different types of reviews, all under obviously different standards, that all provide limited assurance. The last possibility is no assurance at all. So this would be your preparation report, your compilation report, and agreed upon procedures. Okay? So one way that I think is very helpful to think of these 3 engagement types for non-issuers is that they kind of stack up on each other. So a preparation, you organize the financial information into financial statement format, but you do not issue a report. This is why you have no assurance provided on every page, okay? Because there's no report to say no assurance provided. Therefore, there's no disclaimer because there's no report to have that disclaimer on. Compilation is basically your preparation plus a report. So you have no assurance, but you also have a disclaimer on it. And the report says no assurance on it. Okay? Remember here also, because you're issuing a report, seeing the report could otherwise be misleading. So if you're not independent, you must disclose it. And then the no assurance provided for AUP. You're not providing any assurance, any limited assurance or opinion because you're performing specific procedures that you agreed to with the client. You do have to be independent for this though. And we will get into that in a second. So, this section right here, I wrote this out a few times and it helped me remember, but I like to think that there's exam/review on 2 of them, and then the other 2 have exam/AUP. On this one that has 4, this is the prospective financial statements. Because of the nature of prospective financial statements, this also includes prep and compilation reports. If you think through that, it makes sense. Okay. So, there's exam/review for pro forma, exam/review for MD&A, exam/AUP for compliance, and exam AUP for prospective financial statements, as well as preparation and compilation. Now remember, there is no review for compilation or prospective financial statements, okay? Okay, now that we have that under, one thing I want to point out to you, and forgive me because I do think that this was a little bit misleading on my part right here, but these right here, I actually like to write, wow, that's really bad handwriting, that this is dependent on the service. The service that you perform takes precedence for these, as well as these 4. Okay? When you're asking yourself, for example, in a preparation of prospective financial statements, well, a preparation is SSARS, but prospective financial statements is grouped down here. The standard that is applied depends on the actual service being provided, okay? This goes for the rep letter as well. The service line, all you have to remember is that the service line takes precedence in all situations except for one, which is if it's restricted. Restricted always takes precedence. The next thing is service line. Okay? I don't know if this will help anyone, but I like to think of restriction kind of like a dominant gene allele. If there's restricted, it's always going to be restricted. Kind of like recessive traits versus dominant traits. I don't know, whatever. Anyways. Okay, run through that. Standards. Independence. Is independence required? As long as you're performing or providing any level of assurance, yes, independence is required. You can see that here. No. No assurance, no independence. There's one exception, and this is probably the only kind of exception that you really have to remember outside of maybe some of the restricted ones. That's agreed upon procedures. You might be wondering why independence is required because you're not providing any level of assurance. This, per my understanding, is because performing agreed upon procedures as an independent person is going to give this is because of objectivity purposes, okay? One way that I like to think of it, I don't know why this works for me, but my thought is if you're performing specific procedures that the client wants you to do, there's a reason why they hired you to do it. Otherwise, they would just do it themselves. Independence and objectivity is important. This wouldn't make a difference for a compilation or preparation because you're just assembling financial data, okay? Agreed upon procedures are a little bit more unique, so that independence is required. Okay. Restricted or general? Actually, I'm going to go over the rep letter first because this is actually in line with independence and level of assurance as well. If you're not providing any assurance, you do not need a rep letter. That's it. The end. Down here, these subgroups, whatever you want to call them, the rep letter, dependent on the service that you're performing. So if you are performing a preparation of prospective financial statements, you do not need a rep letter. If you are performing an examination of prospective financial statements, you do need a rep letter. Okay? The last thing that I want to go over besides procedures is restricted or general. I like to think of this as restricted has to do with scenarios and unique situations and unique, kind of a unique put together packet of stuff, whatever you want to call it, like a unique engagement that is put together that is only meaningful or understandable to specific users. So a SOC 1 report is restricted. There's no reason why others should have this. It's restricted, and it's intended for specific people to use. Agreed upon procedures are very unique, so these especially are restricted. Down here, MD&A compliance and prospective financial statements that are a projection are restricted, and then pro forma and forecasts are general. One thing that helps kind of determining what's what is that forecasts, for example, are general because they represent expected reality, and a lot of people understand how forecasts work. This is not a unique situation where you need a whole description of what's going on and why they input what they did. Whereas projection are restricted because they're hypothetical scenarios that are, like I said, only meaningful and understandable to specific users. Okay? Restricted always takes precedence, guys. If this says restricted, if there's a projection, if you are preparing a projection, as you can see here, it says general. That's wrong. It will always be restricted because the first thing that always takes precedence is restricted use, and the second thing is the service line that takes precedence. Okay? Service line always takes precedence unless it has to do with restricted use. Last thing, main procedures. You should know this for audit. I think we ran over that at the start too. 10Q, the reviews. Any of the reviews. All reviews, similar to how they all have limited assurance, inquiries and analytical procedures. Okay? That's it. Compilation is, preparation, organizing the financial information into a financial statement format. Compilation is the preparation plus a report. SOC 1/2. I added this note. Feel free to look at your notes for those. All I know is the best report is a SOC 1 Type 2 report. Why would you want one? Anyways. examination attestation. These procedures, as you can tell, kind of fall in line with the level of assurance. So, reasonable assurance, the procedures are similar to an audit. Surprise, surprise. And then AUP this is because of the nature of AUP, you are performing specific procedures that you agreed to with the client. Pro forma. These are a historical what if. If this had happened in the past, then what would the financial statements be? Prospective are hypothetical what ifs. There's also forecast, though. That's just expected reality. MD&As, you can only perform if the financial statements are audited. Don't forget that. Compliance, I didn't really review this one as much, so look at your own notes. Good luck, everyone. And I really hope this helped at least one person. Also, note on compliance, those are correct. I just don't have anything to explain on it. Okay, thanks.